Okay, so now you've seen 2 live demos for 2 new BitTitan workload migration products that will allow you to start getting your customers onboarded into the cloud in Azure right away. Like with all new workloads we add into MigrationWiz, if you've used MigrationWiz to do an email migration or a document SharePoint migration, now without having to hire a new resource with the expertise in databases or cloud storage for that matter, you can start doing those migrations today to onboard those customers into those Azure workloads. So we're really, really excited about this next section because it's an entirely new type of content for us that we've never presented on a webinar before. The next 20 minutes, our CIO, Vince Fournier, is going to teach you how to add a new business process and a new tool into your arsenal for running assessments for your customers with the third product in the AzureStarterKit, Health Check for Azure. Next slide. So why are we so excited about this? Well, it's because actually we believe strongly that probably the most successful way that you can start a sales cycle around Azure with your customer that will end in a transaction and in a migration and in a new workload for your customer in Azure is actually by running an assessment. So we believe that 100% of your Azure sales cycles should somewhere towards the beginning have an assessment, because the assessment is going to get your customer excited about it by seeing the different workloads that they have today they can move to Azure, but it's also going to show them return on investment, which makes it really, really easy for you to sell. And so Vince, with his 20 years as an IT service provider and consultant before he came to BitTitan, is going to take that knowledge and show you how to use Health Check for Azure to do just that. Now, if you this first slide you're looking at actually is just some suggestions for how you might start the conversation with your customer to tee up that assessment. One of your existing customers, like an existing Office 365 customer, probably will be very, very open to the idea of you running an assessment for them so you can show them how they'll save money with Azure workloads. And if for some reason you want to do this as an opportunity to create a prospect, you can do that by probing some of these questions we got on the slide. One important point. Some of you will use this in different ways. Some of you will use an Azure assessment to actually open the door and create opportunities. You'll give away the Azure assessment for free, knowing how much money there is to be made, not only once you sell Azure, but how much money there is to be made on Microsoft incentives once you've onboarded the customer. Some of you, however, will turn this into a new revenue-generating service and actually build an offering and pricing around that. And Vince is actually going to talk to you about that. So with that, Vince, our CIO, take it away.
Thanks, Rocco. Okay, so great news. Your customer wants to have an assessment. So we're going to get started. We're going to first go up into the BitTitan Estimator. We're going to purchase Azure licenses or Azure Health Check for Azure licenses. We're going to register the customer account, and we're going to choose the infrastructure and then deploy the agents. So just a couple of tips about choosing the right SKU. We've really got 2 separate SKUs. There is Health Check for Azure Assess and Health Check for Azure Plan. So in the Assess, you deploy the agent on the physical Hyper-V servers or physical servers that are in the environment, and it'll do that initial ROI assessment. In Plan, it has all the features of Assess, but also adds a way to actually plan the migration out by understanding the dependencies. So if you were going to do a workshop that you were going to do as a pre-sales event that you might be doing for free, just to see what the opportunity is in a customer, then I'd probably just buy Assess. But if the customer definitely wants to go and you're trying to prove your value as the partner of choice to take them there, then I would go do Plan right off the bat. So I'm just going to dig into this a little more. So that first step is sign up and onboarding. So as I said, you go up and purchase a license for Health Check for Azure. The licensing is based on one license equals one VM or physical server. So if I've got 2 Hyper-V servers with 10 VMs each, you would need 20 licenses. Within 1 business day after you purchase that, you'll get an email that'll give you directions on how to access the portal. And then you'll navigate to the URL and provide the unique ID in the form of an email address that we give you. So the next step is to confirm the information that we've already filled out for you and to create your own password and enter the access code that we provide you. Next, you'll select the Azure region that you want to use for all the pricing that we give you in the ROI analysis, because different Azure data centers have different pricing. Next, you're going to connect your infrastructure. There's a couple different options here. If they're a full VMware shop, you can just pick VMware and connect agentless. But if they're not a full VMware shop, we recommend you just going in and doing on-premise. That gives you the most flexibility. Once you come in under on-premise, you'll have the ability to download the agent that you will install on the servers. We have both a Linux and Windows agent available for you. Okay, so now you go out and you install those agents on those servers. And the agent is going to collect data for the next 14 days. And this is really important to get an accurate ROI analysis. We need to see how those servers are being used across time. Because if we only analyze them for a very small period of time, that might have, in that window, they might not have been used the way they normally are or to their full extent. And we want to really make sure that we're matching up the right Azure SKUs for the migration. Next, we're going to log into your Health Check account. And we're going to access the detailed reporting about all the physical nodes, CPU, network, and storage. And then we'll see the calculations of the cost to move to Azure with different options. And we will share reports and other information with your customer. So a couple of tips when you're selling with the assessment reports, when you're trying to make that ROI, have that ROI discussion. Highlight servers and software that might be outdated or insecure. You know, let them know that once you move up to Azure, those problems go away. Compare the cost of Azure to the current infrastructure operating costs. So ask your partner, what are you paying today all up for your on-prem data centers? And then, you know, explain all the other different benefits of the cloud, always up to date, secure, easily scale, and more. Okay. So after 14 days, you'll be able to log into the portal and view that completed assessment. So you'll log in with that username and password that you created in the previous step. And you'll immediately see the high-level summary of the results. And so what you can see here is we found 46 nodes. And we found that those 46 nodes are using 79 terabytes worth of storage and putting out about 24 gig a month.
Hey Vince, I want to ask you a quick question. I think some of our partners are wondering, why would it take 14 days to run the assessment? Some assessment tools can be run in 1 hour or 24 hours. 14 days seems like a long time. Why do we run our assessment technology over that period of time?
Yeah, it's really so that we can accurately identify the very best SKU up in Azure to save the right amount of money. So we take a sampling, I think it's like 50,000 samples every couple hours of the, you know, IOPS that are being used, the, you know, the network and the storage and the CPU and the memory. And what we're doing is we're watching over that time how those servers are being used. You know, if you've got a server, a VM right now running on-prem that's got 64 gig of RAM and 16 processors, but we find that over that time we never use more than 4 procs, then we're going to be able to match you up with the exact SKU that will satisfy your needs.
And so an assessment tool that's running over the course of an hour, 24 hours, wouldn't be able to do that?
Not at all. Not at all. Because different servers are used different ways throughout the week and between weeks. Okay, so you'll also see here we're showing, just as we can give you the price for going to Azure, we also give you the price for going to Amazon. You can use this as a Microsoft consultant to really help drive down and show the benefits of Azure and how they compare in the market. Okay, so the first page that you're going to come to is look at the projected cost to run the existing workloads that are on-prem in Azure. And as you can see here, we're saying that the annual cost for this specific data center would cost $220,000 a year. But this is under the hardware pay-as-you-go. And what hardware pay-as-you-go means is if you have a 64 gig of RAM, 16 processor VM on-prem, and you were to take that exact configuration and run it up in Azure, that would be the price that you would have to pay. However, the next, and this is probably going to be similar or maybe a little bit less than what the customer's paying today. So it's to help you have some kind of idea. Now, the real benefit here is looking at the workload pay-as-you-go section. So what this says is we have analyzed how these VMs are being used over these 14 days, and we're shooting for a 90th percentile of utilization to satisfy that workload up in Azure. So in that case where I was saying you have that very large VM on-prem, if we found that we could still satisfy the needs of how that VM was being used throughout a long period of time, with a smaller configuration up in Azure, we do that work in that business intelligence to make that recommendation. And so one of the things you can see here is, let me flip back one page. You see this server right, this VM right here is a basic A3. That's what this price is based off of for this component, because that's the configuration that it's on-prem. But if I move back forward under the workload pay-as-you-go, you see that we've found that we can still satisfy that need for that server with a A2 up in Azure, and that'll help reduce the costs. Okay. You're also going to be able to have a very quick understanding of the compute that's being used, and with that compute, what the bottlenecks are, how many instances, the observed utilization, and the predicted utilization. You'll be able to look at the storage as well. One of the things we're doing here is, we're really being intelligent about doing that mapping up to Azure, even from a perspective of storage. If the IOPS don't need premium storage up in Azure, we're going to give you basic storage and the pricing for that. If they need premium, we're going to give you that price as well. And then network as well. So how much are you going to spend on egress traffic? So now, from any of these locations, for any of these objects, you can click on the graph to drill in to see more detail. So in this case, you can see this server and the CPU that was used throughout that 14-day period, and that's the observed. And we saw that the observed CPU over that period is 93 days, and CPU is a bottleneck. You then see, based on our recommendation, our recommended SKU to go to, what the actual utilization we predict will be on that machine. Okay, so you've been able to drill in, and you're going to spend a lot of time really familiarizing yourself with their environment so that you can make better recommendations to the customer. But we do give you, a basic report to help you have that ROI that ROI conversation. So by going to the Reports tab, you can click on Download, and a PDF will be presented to you that'll compare all the different TCO, and even break it down between going workload pay-as-you-go, prepaying 12 months, or just paying 12 months or paying monthly. Okay, congratulations. The customer loved what you did, and they see the ROI, so they want to go to Azure. So at this point, you want to go start planning out the migration to Azure. And there's lots of different complexities here. And the number one biggest complexity is dependencies. What order do I take these servers and move them up to Azure? If I pick up a SQL server and there's 10 apps that are using that SQL server, you can't just pick up the SQL server alone. You need to bring up those 10 apps at the same time and move. So you need to be able to put to a project plan, analyze all those dependencies, and make smart decisions. So if you didn't already buy the plan SKU up front, you need to go buy the plan SKU now. And then just note, you'll need to rerun the assessment phase. If you're doing an assessment only, as I mentioned before, you just install the agents on the physical servers. We do that because it's the easiest thing for you to be able to do if you don't really have a great relationship with the customer. But once you get into the plan phase, we need more data. So you need to take that agent and you need to install it within all of the VMs so that we can really get tight analysis of the applications that are on those VMs and what and who are communicating with it. So you'll log into your account, select the Migration Planning tab, and you'll see a visual mapping of the infrastructure group by workload. And then you'll learn about cloud readiness of each node and set up the optimal migration settings and firewall rules. So a couple tips. Show immediate value to your customer just from visualizing their infrastructure. Most of these customers have no idea even what they have. Use the dependency visualization to identify low complexity workloads to migrate first to provide immediate value to your customer. So you don't want to go in there and start picking all the complex workloads that will take you months to move. Our tool will enable you to actually see the low-hanging fruit and start immediately migrating the low-hanging fruit, and then over time get to those more complex workloads. And and then you'll pick each of those workloads one group at a time that are complex. Okay, so within the migration planning section, we will give you a visualization of what your network looks like, and we'll actually analyze it and try to group servers together for you. You're free to move these groups around, rename them, do whatever you want to do with them. Now, I go in and I choose a specific group of servers, and what it's going to show me on the left-hand side are all the applications that depend on those servers. If I go in and click a specific server, I see the applications that depend on that one server. And in this case, I've picked a SQL database. Moving forward, if I highlight all the applications that are using that server, it'll actually draw the web of dependencies for you to truly understand, if you move that SQL server, what needs to go with you. Now, if I click on one of those specific dependencies, I can drill in on the right-hand side and see the information about that. I can see the IP addresses of the source and target. I can see which apps on the client are accessing which processes on the server. I can see all kinds of details about that specific relationship between those two servers and be able to drill into that. And this is just a little drilled down detail to show me the exact processes on client and server that are being used. I also have the ability, one of the things you're going to have to do once you move that up to Azure is you're going to have to configure the firewall rules on the VM up in Azure. So what we'll do is we'll analyze actually what are the firewall rules that are going to be needed to have these different dependent workloads access and do the things that they need to do. So we'll actually tell you what those firewall rules are. And that's an example of what you would see. So now you'd be able to go configure that. sure it's not clicking. Okay, and then this is just to show you, when you click on a group, you can not only see it in a visualized form, but you can also get a full detailed report that you can drill into and get all the details about those groups. Okay, assessment is completed and time to migrate. Select the servers to migrate to in Azure based on the plan recommendations. Migrate your content to Azure. As we've talked about, we have database migration, so you can identify those SQL servers and migrate those. You can identify different storage that you have in on-prem and migrate those. You know, within the roadmap, you're going to see a lot of other migration capabilities to enable you within MigrationWiz coming very soon. You collect your migration fees and ongoing Azure revenue from your customer, and then talk to your next customer, and you're on your way to building a profitable Azure business. Just a couple trick tips. We found that industry standard rates for Azure migrations are around $3,500 per VM. It's based on the complexity, so it's really difficult to tell. But I also wanted to say, you know, constantly check back with us. You know, we pretty much release new sources and targets and types every month or two, so always check back with us to see if there's other workloads that you'll be able to migrate to Azure.
We asked poor Vince to try to do that in 20 minutes, which obviously is not a lot of time. He did a great job. So you've now seen how to sell Azure and start that sales cycle and get them excited, and it's really easy to sell customers value when you can show them ROI with that, so that's huge. You can see a more in-depth demo of that anytime you want. Just reach out to your account manager, and we'll do a deep dive with you, a deep dive of the deep dive if you want. You also then saw how to implement that into specific professional services opportunities around SQL 2005 end of life and using database migration to migrate that to Azure SQL, which, by the way, saves your customer a ton of money if they do that. You also saw how to get unstructured data from Amazon AWS Blob Storage into Azure Blob Storage is another great specific tangible money-making opportunity. Now, my favorite part of the webinar, let's get Microsoft to pay us to do all this cool stuff while we're helping our customers. Amanda has a ton of great content around how you can cash in on Microsoft incentives that are happening right now as you're doing these assessments and other things we just taught you how to do. Amanda?
Sounds good. Okay. Advance the slide. And we'll talk about money. I don't see it advanced, but I'm just going to jump in, okay?
Okay, yeah. We've got your Azure funding pie slide up right now.
Perfect. Okay. So Microsoft has both partner incentives and funding programs, just like Rocco was talking about, that you can take advantage of. Pretty exciting, right? So our Azure incentives reward partners for driving consumption of Azure services on customer subscriptions that are purchased either through our online web portal, which we call MASA, as well as enterprise agreements, campus and school agreements, and then MS-led in mainland China. Now, in order to be eligible for this incentive, partners do need to have either a silver or a gold cloud productivity competency. So if you don't have that competency yet, I'd encourage you to take a look at the requirements to obtain one. The current incentive rate is 20% on Azure subscriptions, and it's paid to the digital partner of record on that subscription. And the customer determines that in their Azure account portal. And partners can earn a maximum of $120,000 per subscription over a 14-month period. And there's no minimum on the number of subscriptions that you can be paid out on. Now, there is a minimum threshold for payment in any given period of $200. So if you're just kind of getting started out and you happen to be under that $200 mark, then it'll just simply be placed on hold, kind of like a container, and it'll roll over until the next period when that minimum is met. So take a look at the Microsoft Incentive Guide. There's a link here. And then I also encourage you to keep up to date through the U.S. Partner Incentives and Investments Yammer page as well. That's a great source of information. Now, for those of you that are doing business in our SMB market with either open or maybe through CSP, there are additional incentives with our U.S. SMB Champions Club program. So check out the SMB Advantage. There's a link here, and then the U.S. SMB Open and CSP links to learn a little bit more information about those. Or we welcome you to attend one of our upcoming SMB Live regional events. They're happening all over the U.S., and there's actually a link to those in the notes section of the deck. So the Cloud Champions Club incentives do go through June 2016. There's 20% on Azure. There's 10% on EMS sales. There's 15% offered on net new Office 365 customers. And again, these are purchased on either Open or CSP. So these are in addition to what you might already be getting if you're doing CSP. So take a look at those. Next slide, please. Okay. So there are several different partner funding programs that I want to share with you. Now, BitTitan does a great job of keeping up to date on these and making the associations for partners. And most of that funding comes through a program that's called PI, which stands for Partner Investment Engine. The PI portal is, well, it's actually going to have a new look and feel on February 1st. And this is funding for U.S. corporate accounts activities, for public sector, and for EPG. And then there is a separate program inside of PI for SMB segment type of activities. Now, eligibility on this does depend on your partner's status. Most do require cloud platform competency or Azure Hero Maker program. Okay. The current funding here is available until June, into June 2016, but that is while supplies last. So different from incentives, the funding programs do have a limited budget or limited bucket of money, and they can run out. Now, the first one that I will call out here, though, is the Azure Assessment Funding. And this is a partner-led assessment that must lead to a minimum of 10x attributable customer Azure consumption. So, for example, a $2,000 engagement must lead to a minimum of a $20,000 Azure consumption. And you can earn those funds by using BitTitan's health check for Azure to perform that Azure assessment just like they showed you. There's also a SQL modernization assessment and a proof of concept where you can earn up to $6,000 per customer. And I will say some of our partners choose to offset the cost to the customer, and then some of them say, you know what, I'm going to kind of split it 50-50, and I might use some of that to reinvest in the campaign. And so it is up to you, but a lot of partners do offer that incentive to the customer. And a lot of times it's a really good way to kind of get started, too, in the Azure space. Okay, so the next one is there's an EMS assessment and a proof of concept. You can get up to $3,000 per customer. There is a link also in the deck and the notes, which if you were to follow that, it'll provide everything that you need to do to run that kind of an application discovery assessment, and there's a sample video guide there, too. Another one that we have is the Azure IoT Quick Start Assessment. You can get up to $2,000 there. And a content and facilitator guide are available in our IoT partner portal. Again, there's a link in the deck. We have something called it's an Azure Everywhere Driving First Workload. Kind of a big mouthful there, but it sort of says what it is. Driving that first workload on Azure, you can get up to $4,500 per customer. Now, for that, you're driving a 4-day workshop and a consumption plan with activities with a goal to get customers to $1,000 per month run rate spend. So that's what that one is. Then I thought I might mention our CIE program. It's our Customer Immersion Program, because that, too, has funding. For $500, you can run a half-day immersive experience for your customers, so that you're not standing up in front of them, with slideware talking about what Azure is. You're actually getting them using the platform with a solution built on that platform. And that's been a really powerful pre-sales activity that some of our partners have used. Now, our SMB segment does have a similar Azure IoT Quick Start. And then they also have funding for partners in what's called the Champions Club to do marketing campaigns. And in those marketing campaigns, if you're in the Champions Club, you could get anywhere from $2,000 all the way up to $7,500, depending on your eligibility status in that program for doing marketing. And, you know, I think the last thing I'll mention on SMB, for all things SMB, there's a link here that I put at the bottom that will lead to, you know, how do I get into the Champions Club? How does that work? What are the programs and incentives and so forth? And so that's just a really good landing page for all things SMB. So, you know, and then to learn more on any of these, that same Yammer group that I mentioned on the previous slide and the incentives is a really good connection to all the programs and how to learn how to use Pi and how to get access to funding as well. So, okay, Rocco, I'll turn it back over to you for next steps.
That's a lot of money, Amanda.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty exciting. I encourage you to take advantage of it where you can.
So for the partners on this webinar, did you realize that as part of being a BidTitan partner, available to you through our MSP Complete platform, we have an incentive and a funding department that can help you understand exactly which incentives and funds apply to you, how to apply for them, and how to cash in. I bet you may have not known that that was available through MSP Complete. So if you have any questions about any of these programs, or you want specific guidance on how to apply for them, for example, if you want to make sure you get your $2,000 for running your Azure assessment that Vince just showed you how to do, ask your account manager to talk to Allison Bergquist, who heads up that department for us, and that's included to you for free as part of being a BidTitan partner in the MSP Complete platform.